a lot of the time people are giving up the opportunity for paid work, or they see this as an opportunity to upskill throughout any event. We make sure that we're trying to train people to a level where they may be able to then become a FIBA technical official, or they may be able to get their FIBA life stats certificate. If nothing else, they're able to come away with it, with the experiences and the skills that then they can take on to other jobs.
Meet Amanda Jenkins. Her passion for sport and some great initial volunteer opportunities kickstarted Amanda's journey in sports and event management, eventually landing her a dream job at FIBA. During this podcast, Amanda and I chat about what it's like to work for one of the world's most popular sporting bodies and how FIBA manages to connect with their volunteers throughout Asia Pacific, including how to manage the cultural complexities of a diverse workforce. With the Women's World Cup set to take place in Sydney in 2022, Amanda discusses the important role that volunteers play in delivering large-scale events and also outlines the importance of providing career opportunities and training to enhance the volunteer experience. This podcast was recorded remotely, so we do apologise for the broken audio at times. Here's hoping this podcast can be recorded in person sooner rather than later. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Amanda Jenkins from FIBA, thank you so much for joining us. How are you up there, mate?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Shannon. It's been good to be involved in this. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, good stuff. So you're up in the Gold Coast at the moment. You guys have had a pretty clear run of it so far with COVID.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're very lucky up here. We've had a fair bit of freedom, thankfully, and blessed with quite a bit of sport for once. So it's been great for a sports lover like myself, that's for sure.
Yeah, nice. So certainly have up there in Queensland. I'd really love to start at where it all began for you, from uni, working your way into it. I know a bit of volunteering in sports was required. If you could just take us back to the start, would be great to understand.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, for me, the journey really started, through my love of sport growing up. I entered into a commerce degree majoring in sports management and exercise science at Deakin University. Really, that was because I had absolutely no idea where I wanted to end up, really thinking I'd go down the exercise science pathway, and the dream, was to volunteer and work with elite athletes throughout the world. But then my journey really took me down the sports management path, I think really because of the volunteering, the internships and the part-time jobs that I had along the way. So, I mean, for me, the main thing I think I took it out of my first sports management lecture was that you needed to be working and doing as much as possible in the industry while you're still studying. And so I was lucky at the time. I was working at a gym, one day a week. That opened up a fair bit of opportunity for me later on in my career. But at least it gave me a taste of work while still, studying full time. I was coaching basketball, local and down in Melbourne. So that again was another aspect of sport.
Yeah.
And then through some sports contacts managed to get a role, which basically was a volunteer role with School Sport Victoria. And that saw me running sports carnivals in the local district and, athletics carnivals, badminton, anything and everything really.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's a different career path, isn't it? The elite journey or the broader sort of sports, and the differentiator is probably the community aspect, and being part of a larger team involved is probably the sports management route that you decided to go down.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other one for me, like a lot of the things that I did were at that local level, at grassroots. But then I was able to grab an internship with Football Federation Victoria as well, which was part of their W League, the Melbourne Victory W League team. So that exposed me a little bit to the elite level, although at that time, the W League was really only starting out. So it was a lot of hands-on work. And I remember, meeting the manager at the time who kind of took me under her wing. She was just so driven and really passionate about doing well for the sport, which I think gave me a good insight into how hands-on, sports management actually is. It's not the glamorous side that we all see and we all like, because that's the fun stuff. There is a fair bit of behind the scenes that go on. So I think that and the grassroots work really was an opportunity for me to understand and see what it takes to make it in sport.
Yeah, fantastic. And a bit of time with Melbourne Olympic Parks, probably around the Australian Open and all the events that they host. We had Karen Evans on recently, who's the head of workforce there. So I guess probably giving a different perspective to it. But you would have seen basically every major event that Melbourne hosts and being able to work firsthand on the ground at those events.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that really made me really get into the events part of the industry. You know, I originally applied for the Oz Open. You know, that's when they do their big recruiting drive right before the Oz Open. And for me, you know, that opened up for the first couple of years. You know, you're just working at the Open, and you know they're long days, but what an opportunity you get to. You know, yes, you're dealing with the crowds, which is the best part about the whole sport, and watching some great games. And then from that, you know, you start to get some opportunity at major events throughout the year. So concerts. I think I remember, you know, just recently I had a Facebook memory about how I was ushering at Usher. You know, I thought I was pretty witty back in the day. So it was just, I think that really led me to understand more about the diversity within the industry as well. It was fantastic. And it's actually one of the things I miss about living in Melbourne is having to kind of give up that role, you know, when I did eventually get the job at FIBA, you know, because that was something that it was always different. And I think that's what made it so, you know, exciting. You never knew what you were going to get, but it always made it really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that diversity of experiences, both good and bad, is what helps create a good resume, whether or not it's written on the resume, but what you can probably speak to in an interview. I mean, can you talk to that a little? You've clearly seen and been involved with a lot, from volunteering to paid work to different levels of management there. The good and bad experiences creating a whole. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that definitely is what then helped me land the job at FIBA. At the time, I had just finished studying. I'd spent about 6 months doing a part-time job at the local council, you know, in the sports area. And the job at FIBA came along, and they were, you know, looking for a sports administrator. And really, I remember from the interview, they weren't after a certain, you know, discipline of sport. They wanted someone with a bit of an all-rounder aspect. And I think that's where my history and my understanding about management events, you know, really shone through. And it was because of that I had to move to Canberra for the job originally. But I think my love of, you know, the sport and basketball, and then the opportunity, wanting a graduate into an international organisation, you really can't ask for a better opportunity than that, that's for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll get to the volunteering side of FIBA shortly, but just give us a quick wrap of what your role is at the moment with FIBA. And in doing so, can you just give me a bit of an understanding of the landscape, how FIBA as an international body of basketball work, and how that relates to your organisation you work for here in Australia?
Yeah, definitely. FIBA globally, you know, we are obviously the governing body for the sport of basketball. When I first started at FIBA, we went through a massive governance restructure where we became one FIBA. Our office was now part of, you know, the global family. We have our headquarters based in Switzerland, and then we have 5 regional offices around the world, and we're all championed with that same agenda of you know, being the most popular sports community, and our objectives are the same as, you know, my colleagues in the Asia office, my colleagues in Europe. We're all under, you know, the same, working under the same principles. So my role really has grown since then. You know, as I said, I came on as a graduate in a sports administrator role, fundamentally looking after, you know, our events, which weren't overly many each year. You know, we'd run one youth event and one senior event every couple of years. And then since the one FIBA change, we've actually started doing more events because there's more opportunities for our national federations. Yep. So in Oceania, we have 22 national federations throughout the Pacific. Obviously, the big ones, Australia,
reporting
New Zealand.
To you guys, like under your body,
exactly.
Under Oceania.
Yeah, so we're the ones charged with, I guess, working with these countries. All federations report into FIBA globally, but the 22 in Oceania, that's our responsibility here in this office to help develop the sport in those countries, run events, make sure the sport's properly governed in this region. So our events, you know, across the board could be held in Papua New Guinea, Guam, all the way out to Tahiti. So we're quite a big footprint.
Yes.
Servicing, it's a large part of the world with a small population base.
Yes, of course. It is. It is. Yeah, very interesting. Well, it provides a diverse work experience for you, doesn't it? In terms of different personalities and people you have to work with and cultures, no doubt. And volunteering, I think, is at the heart of a lot of countries and the way they operate, in particular in Australia where we are. But can you talk to me about how you work with volunteers in 23 different countries with different cultures of volunteering?
Yeah, look, it's not easy. I'd be lying if I said it was an easy job, but I think the approach is the same across the board. People love the sport and people want to volunteer and be part of something bigger than themselves. For us, it doesn't matter what level of event we're hosting. There's always that core group who really put in and really just have that, they want to be involved. For us, basketball is probably the third to fourth biggest sport in the Pacific. There's some big ones which we not compete with,
sure.
but that we're working with, obviously rugby and football, even volleyball in the Pacific is quite large. So basketball, is a growing sport and we're getting bigger and bigger. I think the big thing for us is just understanding that everyone's there for their own reasons. And I think the personal connection, the good thing about working in the Pacific is people are, friendly, they're lovely, they're wanting to be there to put in and to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. So that's been the biggest learning for me across the journey, is just how to interact with different cultures, how to make sure that you're being respectful but still getting the outcomes that you need for an event.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. For you, would be so critical to find the consistencies compared to trying to work with the nuance of each place, which is important, but you need to find a level that you need to operate on, isn't it? How do you go about setting expectations or trying to make sure the outcome is the same from one country to the next from their volunteering output effectively? How do you try and make it consistent?
Yeah, I think for us, we've got a really good core group of people that we work with, year on year across every country.
In each country, yeah, sure.
Yeah, yep. So there's a good foundation already there. And then for us, it's about just making sure that we prepare accordingly. So, we have a group of, volunteers from Australia and New Zealand who help us then in some of the more technical areas. So I'm talking, stats and table officials, refereeing. We always make sure that, those people are people who we work with closely and we know what we're going to get from those people. So we will always make sure that, say we've got an event out in some of these countries, we'll send people in advance to local events to try and train up the workforce beforehand to a level that, we're comfortable with. And then once our event comes around, we've seen the people before, we know the names, we know the faces. And it's really a journey throughout the week, the period that we have our events for. And I think that, we're very lucky in this region. We've got some of the two biggest countries in basketball in the world, in Australia and New Zealand, with some really, really good technical people that we can call upon. And I think for me, that as an event manager, that's the most important thing, is making sure that you've got a team around you. There's no need for me to be across every aspect of the event, as long as we've got people who I can call on that then can lead the volunteers on the ground, no matter where we are.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough. And is your requirement for volunteers drastically different between an Australia versus Tahiti? Clearly, the venues and the capacity of fans will be different, but I would assume you're getting a lot more interest perhaps in Australia, where people may have more time to volunteer.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. When we're running these events, a lot of the time people are giving up the opportunity for paid work, or they see this as an opportunity to upskill. Throughout any event, we make sure that we're trying to train people to a level where, they may be able to then become a FIBA technical official, or they may be able to get their FIBA life stats certificate. If nothing else, they're able to come away with it, with the experiences and the skills that then they can take on to other jobs. If you compare that then to, say, I worked at the Com Games as well, so that's a completely different experience where we had more applicants than we had spots. So it was that opposite problem of, okay, let's actually make sure that people are being usefully utilised, because you don't want people to be giving up their time, which
to be standing on a street corner doing nothing.
Exactly, yeah. So that's something, it's just a different set of challenges. But the expectations, and what we hope to deliver from an event doesn't change. How we might go about it is probably the area that we would amend depending on the event.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I'm interested, again, on that structure with FIBA. How much do they dictate, if you will, the way that you operate and manage your volunteers, or are they general guidelines that they provide, or is there reporting KPIs you have back to Switzerland on how the region is going with volunteers? Like, how do you guys work together when it relates to volunteers from an international federation perspective?
Yeah, so I think the good thing about the way we operate as FIBA is that I'm very close with my colleagues in Europe, so the competition staff in Europe, competition staff in Asia. We will have yearly meetings at a minimum, and I'll be regularly in contact with them. So there's a lot of consistency across what we do around the world, and the level of, what is it? We will share documents, we'll share our PDs on positions that we want, and understandings about how many volunteers do we need in order to run an 8-team 2-week event. There's a lot of consistency across the board. Obviously, it's quite unique in some of the circumstances, so we will tailor it. Every region tailors it to suit their national federations.
Of course.
But I think the great thing about the way FIBA is structured is we are one competitions department. So
yes.
I'm in regular contact with my counterparts, which means that we can all learn from each other. And I'm really big on that, is trying to learn from each other. I had a really great opportunity last year to work at our FIBA World Cup in China. I was working with the European competitions manager. He and we're probably very different in our personalities, but at the end of the day, we're still all both trying to do the same thing. And where our venue, we actually ended up having one of the most successful venues across the World Cup. And I think it was because of the way we interacted with the local organising committee, the volunteers. Sure. That was such a good opportunity for me, just to see that level of event. That's the pinnacle of our sport. So for me, it was a great opportunity. And I think it really just emphasised how it doesn't matter what level of event you're doing, the way you treat volunteers, the way volunteers want to be there, and the moments that you create with your group is the most important.
Yeah, of course. It's an interesting one. In an upcoming episode of the podcast, we're going to have Anne Catherine from FIFA, who's the head of their volunteers. And what FIFA are doing is trying to create a global community of volunteers. So in your example, a volunteer in Tahiti could use that same profile live and apply for the event in Costa Rica if they were to get involved, or to travel the world and volunteer with that sport and eventually move into paid and contractor roles because they understand the sport so well. But I think it's just a really interesting way that an international organisation can look at that and provide local opportunities for now to people all around the world that want to travel with the sport. Do you find at FIBA that you have volunteers, maybe from Australia even, that travel overseas to do that, or even get volunteers from international to come down under at all?
Yeah, I think that's something that, is definitely going to continue to grow the more the events world grows, particularly for FIBA. In 2017, we changed our competition format for the men to home and away games in the lead up to the World Cup, and then the same in the lead up to our regional cups. Sure. So there's more games happening more often, which one of the fundamental reasons that we went down that path is because it helps build up the capacity of our national federations, both the staff within the national federation, but then also their volunteers that exist within the federation. And since then, we've already seen one of our stats coordinators here in Australia. She was off at the World Cup last year, and she was assisting with stats for the World Cup as one of the leaders. So, assessing games, making sure that stats were consistent across the board. And that's one of the crucial, roles that we have at a World Cup. I think we're only going to see more and more where opportunities grow. The Women's World Cup in 2022 being down here in Australia, I think opens up a lot of possibilities. It's not often that you get these major events in this region. So I think we'll see, a lot of opportunity then for people from across Australia to be involved, and potentially some volunteers from around the region as well.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing to talk about. There is the pathway that you can provide. Clearly for you, it would have been a feather in your cap, or the teams, to see, a local volunteer go and represent on the international stage. They're not shooting 3-pointers, but they're a volunteer that you've seen progress. Can you talk a little about progression for volunteers and what you guys try and do to make sure volunteers can sort of level up? And for an organisation, that's a pretty valuable employee one day, or freelancer potentially, that understands your sport probably more sometimes than the staff that work there.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, for this region, taking a step back from maybe event volunteerism, but just the
general sport,
general volunteer. Yeah. So for us, one of the best examples I can use is we have this program called Basketball for Good, which is about using the sport in terms of making people's lives better. We ran this program in Fiji since 2014, and one of the coaches, so we call them Hoops for Health coaches, he would come to training as a coach, spent the 6 months learning how to become a coach, going out to schools, running clinics. After that, 6 to 12 month period, he was then able to get a full-time job. And whilst it was a loss for us because he wasn't able to be part of our programs anymore, it was a sign of how this opportunity, the chance to volunteer and be part of a program, then upskilled him enough to get into full-time employment. And when we're talking the Pacific region, that's a massive opportunity. On the event side of things, we love to see, some of our volunteers who might be working within federations who will then bring to other events. So last year we had an event in New Caledonia, and we had a French volunteer who was living and working in Vanuatu. Because of the experiences we'd had with him, we asked him to come across to New Caledonia and help be part of the organising committee for the New Caledonia event. That was just another opportunity for someone within the region to continue to learn, continue to grow and develop skills in a different area. So those are some of the examples, I guess, for our region, really just seeing events and day-to-day activity within a federation. Volunteers are the lifeblood of our sport, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion point, because I'm presuming it's not necessarily advertised or promoted as if you volunteer with us and there's progression so much. Is it a conscious advertisement you do, or is it sort of an outcome that just happens by chance, do you think? Or is it something you guys really work on?
I think for us, it also depends on the country and which country it is that our event might be happening in. If there's a chance that we might have repeated number of events, that's one of the big things. I think about some of our bigger countries in terms of Fiji and Papua New Guinea. These countries have ongoing volunteer opportunities for these people. So being a Hoops for Health coach, they might get some sort of per diem for participating in that. And then once it comes to an event, they then get another opportunity to grow and develop their skills. It's not necessarily something that we advertise as a progression and as an opportunity down the line, probably more because, it's not, in a lot of these countries, it's not something that's happening every year, these major events.
True.
But definitely there is that opportunity that we can develop from within the countries, and then see where more opportunities exist in future years. Yeah,
definitely. And to talk about a draw card is the 2022 World Cup that's coming down to Australia and the region. That's pretty exciting for us as a country, clearly, and for the sport. But from a volunteer perspective, that could be something that you guys would be working towards, saying, hey, you're great in New Caledonia, come over to Australia and get involved with volunteering. Would that be something you guys would look at, potentially trying to bring the sort of region together under this one event?
Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities for us in terms of some of the programs that we run. We're already in discussions about how we can do some women in basketball projects there, where we bring some of our female leaders into Australia around that time, and then whether there's an opportunity for them to work within the event. Who knows in 2 years' time what we might be able to do. I think the big thing for us is it's just great to be having, a major event in Australia. last year, New Zealand hosted a women's qualifying event, and it was so good to be holding one of these bigger, events for the female game in the region, because it just gave a chance for, the volunteers within that country. New Zealand has a pretty passionate basketball community. So for them to have an international event, in Auckland, it was a chance for the volunteers to actually get that next level of event. And I know already, speaking with some of the people within Australia, they're already thinking about, how can we be involved and how can we get a position part of this event, that's for sure.
Yeah, awesome. For the World Cup, I know it's a long way away, and I know the FIBA aren't necessarily the ones running the volunteer program so much. You're obviously involved, but can you talk to me a little bit about what that volunteer program might look like? I mean, do you know numbers roughly yet about what's required?
Yeah, I think that's all things that we'll still, we'll hash out over the next little while with the local organising committee. Basketball Australia set up, the LOC and Melissa King, who's just been appointed the CEO of the event. So, I know they're in the early stages of that planning with our competitions department to make sure that, they have enough volunteers. I know that in discussions with the statisticians and the table officials, they're really looking to make sure that the program, there's an opportunity for everyone within Australia. Yes, the event will be based in New South Wales, but there will be opportunities for people from all over the country to be involved and take part. So I think that's really exciting. My colleagues in the other parts of the world, I think, don't realise how big Australia actually is. So our event, whilst it's in Sydney next in 2022, there's still that chance that people from all over the country will be involved, and even working with New Zealand as well about bringing some of their key people over as well. The thing about the World Cup, in those technical areas, the technical officials are required to hold the FIBA licenses, which is that more elite level in those areas. So talking live stats and obviously table officials. And that's, I think, a really good opportunity for those people who have worked hard and worked for years in their craft to then come and be part of this major event.
Yeah, brilliant.
Not to say there's then not, there's the ball kids, there's the floor wipers, there's the people, who might be liaisons with the national teams. A very wide variety of opportunity for people to take part.
Maybe some people ushering some ushers as well, Amanda.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. Well, look, it's been really insightful to understand sort of how FIBA operates as a business and how you go managing volunteers around the different countries that you deal with. How many was it again? 30?
22 in
22
Oceania.
Yeah, incredible what your team are managing to do there. So how we wrap up the podcast each week is a quick one for you. Success. What does success look like for you? You've had a great journey in the career so far, still very young in terms of where you're at in your career. What does success look like for you?
I think for me, I get the most success when you see people happy and enjoying themselves. That's the big part about why I love my job. All the stress. I use this example. One year we got to a country. They were having school exams in the gymnasium, so we didn't actually get to see the floor and the court until 24 hours before. When we pulled up the tarpaulin, there was a hole right where the keyway would normally be on one of our courts.
Right.
And that moment of, okay, things are not right. We need to change. That moment of panic. But then to see everybody come together, you've got everyone from the local organising committee trying to find solutions. Yes, there's exhaustion and yes, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. But then to see the event go off and the teams turned up the next morning and wouldn't have had a clue that some of the things we'd been through the night before. And I think for me, that's a sign of success when people who are there to enjoy the event don't have a clue what you've gone through. That's the best part about working in events for me.
Yeah, very, very good point. I think it's pretty consistent across the podcast, a similar response so far. And then dealing with volunteers presents very numerous scenarios, good, bad, ugly, sad moments. Is there one that stands out to you?
There's so many to call upon. Probably one that, it's funny when you look back at it. At the time it wasn't funny, but we do laugh about it now, working at an event over the last couple of years, and stats is one of our big things because it's a new skill that a lot of the people are learning. And our stats coordinator, she has one of the roles for the volunteer is to sign off on the sheet at the end of the game, and she has a stamp. So there was, again, it's not funny now that we think about it. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but it is now. We can laugh about it. These two girls ended up fighting over the stamp because that was the role that they all wanted. And it was funny how that's, such a small thing became a big part of their life. This is day 4 or 5 into the event, and everyone wanted to be the stamp person at the end of the game. And we look back now and we laugh about it, and we actually make sure that we bring 2 stamps so that, we can settle any disputes. But just, it's funny how, such simple things, people really take ownership of them. And I think that's been the big lesson for me with volunteers is just getting to know people and understanding, what they actually want to be while they're there at the event, what it is that they find enjoyable, because I think that's the most important part of it across the board.
Yeah, very good. And it probably relates to this next and final question about just some top tips about engaging with volunteers. You've mentioned some really insightful points about trying to find the consistencies in those countries and the fact that people are all individuals and relating to them. I mean, what are the couple of top ones from your experience?
For me, it's really keeping it simple. It's always greeting people with a smile, no matter what. As an event manager, you could be going through the most stressful period, but those volunteers are there giving up their time. So always making sure you're smiling, even if you're really stressed out. A simple hello to the volunteers and getting to know them. And for me, names is not one of my strong points, but just a simple hello and how you going, mate. I think that's what really makes people feel like you they're there. The other one that always is good is to have some sort of giveaway, some sort of prize. We actually introduced this volunteer of the day activity in a lot of our countries. It's something simple like a hat, a pair of socks, or a top or something, but at least it's something but at the end of the day, everyone's eager to find out who it is and really celebrating those little wins. That's the big part about it. It could be something as simple as, someone helped somebody else, or somebody stepped up and took on a role that nobody else really wanted. Just highlighting those little things, because it makes volunteers realise that you're watching, you're seeing what's happening, and you're appreciative of what they're doing.
Yeah, brilliant. And where you started work originally in Melbourne Olympic Parks, Taryn Evans, the workforce program that got running there, she, in the podcast, I think it'd be an interesting lesson for you. She has a really great, fun structure of end of year awards, award ceremony, basically focusing on those little things that people do throughout the year and appreciating volunteers at a proper ceremony. And not everyone's got the resources of Melbourne Olympic Park. I fully understand that, but the concept of rewarding volunteers for the most simple things, I think, is something that's consistent across the board. Yeah, really great. So,
definitely.
Yeah, crucial thing, isn't it? So, look, thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. And it's been an incredible journey that you've had, and one that's only going to get more exciting with the Women's World Cup coming down to Australia. So you've got an exciting few years ahead of you, and all the best, mate. It's been really nice chatting to you today. You
too, Shannon. It's really great to be involved. And as I said, events is made by the people. So I look forward to next being able to run an event, because it's been a bit of a lean year, but we're looking forward to things hopefully normalising soon, and we can get back out there and seeing the people in the community, that's for sure. Yeah, very good. Thanks so much. All right, well, look, we'll stay in touch, and thanks again. Thanks, Shannon. Bye. See ya. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Engage Volunteer podcast with Amanda Jenkins. We hope you enjoyed it. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, then welcome. The Engage Volunteer aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging their communities to connect them to events and causes they're passionate about, with new episodes released each Wednesday fortnight. The best way to support the Engage Volunteer podcast is to click follow on your Spotify app and tell your friends about us. On the next episode of the Engage Volunteer podcast, we're very lucky to be joined by Mike Nishi, Head of Chicago Event Management. In this podcast, Mike also discusses the important role volunteers play in creating a lasting legacy when it comes to environmental and social changes within a community. With thousands of participants and volunteers, Mike highlights how organisations can and should consider education and training as a means not only to enhance the event experience,
but to give back to communities in a meaningful way. We'll catch you then.